She gave it to me. Yeah. But the link, if you need, Liz, have we got anybody else?
Sorry?
There's the link there.
Okay, could you just forward that to me, please, in case I need it?
It's all set, got the camera, everything. The size of the room was really good, mate. Yeah, like nice share.
So we're on.
Well done.
Live. Here you go. Oh, right. I'll go and say hello. Well, the bottle shop closes at 10. If I'm still doing that,
What are we going to leave your country?
no, I'm allowed one way home.
I'll turn drop them. I'll get all
That'll be fun.
So it's back to right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, next week.
Tomorrow. Oh, Friday. This Friday. Will we get?
So I talked about Richie Sleep with the he wanted me to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Neil Springwood. Yeah. Oh, well, I spoke to Neil today at and what happened, I said, well, mate, you definitely got deals. I'm just didn't get paid. I know. And you got well, no, because they were, look, it's already in the network. Stop losing out its presentation. And so the same thing. I think just come up with the content. Oh yeah, that was another person.
Really great to work with and I used to roll out when I led my friends, I had to start and I said to us, Three weeks in. So is it well, I on my
Oh,
Dallas, Houston, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. But so where is yeah. No, I just said the name. I don't use my Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's really hard. A little bit, yeah. It's actually yeah, well, I processed it
We ever open opposites.
yeah, so we all are different. Tell me all the we don't. Yeah, we'll play.
Hi, welcome, good evening. My name is Tony Fernandez. I'm the principal licensee and owner of First National Rochedale. My wife Frances is the co-owner of our business and also looks after the property management team, is our business development manager. I have a number of our staff here tonight. Would you all come forward so that we can all be identified? So to my left, I have Teresa Stewart. A lot of you may know Teresa. She's our office manager, been with our business for over 16 years. Then we have Lisa. She's a property manager, may look after your portfolio. We have Caroline, Catherine, Belinda, also property managers. And we have Jelena, who is our leasing clerk. But she's also the first person you will hear on the phone. Okay. So this is our team, or part of our team from First National Rochedale. I'd like to welcome you all tonight and thank you very much for coming out to this session. I'd also like to welcome Aaron Davies from First National Assist and his team, who will be giving our presentation as our guest speaker tonight. Tonight is about understanding the market, understanding parts of investment, understanding about taxation. It's just really an educational night. Aaron has over 30 years experience providing these sort of seminars across Australia. He's a very intelligent gentleman, he's full of knowledge. And he's going to pass some of that knowledge on to you all tonight. So please, if you would all join with me in welcoming Aaron to the...
Some expectations to live up to, so I'll do my best. And it's still a nice little tight room tonight, so I don't need microphones, which is pretty good and relaxed. So relax and enjoy, guys, tonight. It's pretty relaxed, pretty easy going, what we're going to cover tonight. I've had a bit of an introduction already, so I don't need to talk too much about myself. Generally, when you come to nights like these, you often get a paid speaker or someone hasn't done it before, but I have been in the industry for a long time now. I'm at building companies, development companies. So what we're going to try and do tonight is basically impart as much knowledge as we possibly can. Actually, Steve, maybe we'll close the doors, sort of keep it a bit warm or cool, or get that cold draft going. There we go. So what we're going to cover tonight is fundamentally about education, learning of all things property, and that's the point of tonight. There's not a secret door in there with the toilets where we're going to pull out expensive courses to buy or products or any of those sorts of things. There's none of that tonight. It's purely education. I sort of cover as much ground as I possibly can in the next 4.5 hours, so relax and enjoy yourself. Okay? All right, so confidence. This is the key. Whether you're buying an investment property, your first home, or selling a home, the real key to this is getting a plan and a strategy. So what we're going to do tonight is give you as much information as we possibly can, so when you walk out of here, you know what you're doing, you've got confidence to act, and you can make those sorts of decisions easily, simply, and comfortably. So what we'll cover tonight is sort of where the market's at the moment, what's happening in the lending market. If you're a first-time buyer, do we have any first-time buyers here tonight? No? That's okay. Well, I can skip over that section. Potential? Okay, cool. So we can cover that, how to get into the market, and ultimately how First National can help you achieve your goals and whatever that may be. So, where is the property market at the moment? Now, leading up to the election, sorry, I have a tendency of pacing, so I'll try and get to this side of the room as well. Where is it at the moment? Now, what happens in the property market overall is it's generally perceived by the market what's happening in the market. So, leading up to the election, we've had all of this noise going on about what's happening with properties, net gearing, cash flow, changes in tax. Now, I'm not pro-Labor Liberal, that's not what the debate is about, but all this noise about negative gearing really scared the property market. So what happened with that is everybody put the brakes on. And then the market and the perception is the market's slowing, everybody's holding off. The moment the election was announced, whether you're a Liberal or Labor voter, it was all on. Clearance rates were up, Holson rates were up, people are out there in the market buying, it was all on. So the cycles themselves in different areas in the states, which I will cover, will affect it overall, but ultimately everybody's back in. And Investors have got the confidence, so, you know, if you're a first home buyer, yes, are you competing against them? How do you do it? First home buyers themselves, there was 110,000 of them last year across Australia, and with the new government incentives, that's changed the market, so they're all out there aggressively looking at stock themselves. So fundamentally, the property market is looking the best that it has in a long time. Now, when it comes to funding, lending, and I'm going to cover a subject of how banking and lending works, but ultimately the taps have been turned back on. If anybody's trying to get a mortgage in the last sort of 6 months, it's been very, very tough. One of the biggest changes has been what has happened with APRA. Now, APRA is basically the government body that determines how a bank works. Now, when you go out there and look at a loan, we generally do our budgets and cash flows on whatever the interest rate is at the time. You know, you get on Westpac or Commonwealth and go, oh, it's 6 or 7% or 5%, we do our budget on that. But banks don't work like that. For the last few years, banks have been assessing you at a much higher rate, right? So even if the mortgage might have been 3 or 4 or 5%, they've been assessing you at 7 or 8%. So it's been very, very hard to get the market to get the money out there in place because the lending criteria was so tough. What has happened in the last few weeks is APRA's changed that, and they've reduced the assessment rate for loans way back down. So people that couldn't get a loan 3 or 4 weeks ago now can. So they're actively out in the market. So realistically, what's happened now that Liberal is in and APRA have changed their regulations, the market is on the move. Lending's out there, people are buying, investors are buying, and first home markets are really tapping into that there. So that's the overall impression, right? Not just here in, where are we today? Brisbane, sorry, I do these nationally, so I always try to remember where I am. So overall, it's really good. So through the course of the night, we're going to give you the techniques and understanding how to make smart decisions around buying, investing, and lending. Now, if you've got questions, we do have a pretty quiet room here tonight. The last one I did last week, we had 200 and held them to the end. If you want to hold them to the end, great. We can go through the room, but if you feel you've got something burning you want to crack at me, no dramas at all. We try to make it interactive. So, if property market's moving, lending market's moving, how do you take the next steps towards it? Really the key here tonight is it doesn't matter your circumstances. What I'm going to try and give you is a plan of attack that you can implement no matter what your strategy is so you can move forward with it. Now, the first step is working out how you make your choices. If it's a home, it's ultimately an emotional choice. Right? Now, we all need shelter, yes, and generally the first bill that we always pay is that shelter, whether it's rent or whatever it is, but deep down inside, we want to own our own home. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying own our own home bad, we all love it, but when we make those choices, they're based on what we want, what makes us feel good, is it close to work, is it close to school, whatever that may be. Those choices are emotional, right? But I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can throw some logic back in there to make smart ones. If you're going down the path of investing in property, it's a very, very simple process. It's about making money. That's it. So what you want to try and do is not confused when you're buying an investment property is, do I want to live there? Do I want to retire there? But basically, what will make me the most money? It's always a logical process and steps that you go through. So when you start looking at property, you might go, I'm going to be in debt for most of my life and have that fuzzy feeling of owning my home. Make sure that you love it. If you're going to buy an investment property, make sure it's the best one for you to make money so you can afford the home, so you can put the kids through school, all those sorts of choices there. Now, this is where step 2 and 3 always get confused. Step 2 should be, how much can I spend on one? Now, that's 2 parts. When it comes to your home, obviously, how much can you go back from the bank and get from the bank, but also how much can you cash flow? So if you are going to go down the home road, you want to know, yes, that's what I can get from the bank, but how much can you ongoing service? Now, will that money, if you're going to buy the most expensive home you possibly can, how will that affect other things in your life? All right, so if you buy that really flash home and you're not kids through school, or are you sort of cutting back on, power or food or any of those sorts of things? So how are those things actually cash flow? With investment property, yes, you've got to find out how much you can borrow as well. But the difference with a cash flow with an investment property is that you have other people paying the cost for you as well. Okay? So there's other people helping you out, which I'll explain in our next segment. But then when you look at an investment property, the cash flow is either one of three things. It's cash flow negative, which means you've got to pull money out of your pocket. It's cash flow neutral, which costs you nothing, or it's cash flow positive, in which case you've got more money to put towards your expenses and things. And when you start assessing that from a cash flow perspective, what you've got to start doing is, well, look, yes, that property may cost $10, $20, $30 a week, whatever it is, but would that ultimately $20 or $30 a week help me get to the better home or the better quality of life? So before you actually go out shopping for a home or an investment property, first, make sure you get your finance done correctly, and two, make sure that you've got your budget so you know what you can cash flow on an ongoing basis. Most of the stuff that I cover tonight, really, there's no real hype and any of that sort of stuff. I'm really here to try and protect you guys to make sure that you make smart choices, even when they're the emotional ones. So, once you've worked out what you can spend, what you can cash flow, the next thing is, how do you choose the right one? When it's the home, it's not complicated. What makes you feel the most warm, fuzzy feeling inside? Now, that's ultimately everybody's own individual choices and life choices as well. So some people like apartments, some people like houses, some people like rural, some people like water. There's no right or wrong. The only right or wrong is as long as it makes you feel good. With an investment property, it's really simple. What will make you the most money, cost you the least amount of stress and emotional baggage along the way. It's purely mathematics and logic when it comes to your investment property choices, and that's how you make the choices. Next one down the loop is who you get to work with, right? Because if you're going to go down the home journey or the investment property journey, you need a team around you. Yes, you need real estate agents, you need advisors, but you also need finance people, you need property managers, you need accountants. So having the team around you is crucial to your success and helping you go through the journey. So 4 simple steps. What do I want? How much can I pay for? What's the right choices of products for me? And building the right team around you. Make sense? Cool. So, first home purchase. Potential first home purchase are at the back. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we've got the content there for you. So, considering a first home buyer, how do I get into the market? How am I going to fund the market? And is buying the right home the right choice for me? So, if you're going to get into the market, you don't have any money right away, because what you need to do to get into a property the first time around is have a deposit. I'll explain money and mathematics in a sec, but you need that deposit. We have a thing called the first home owner's grant. So that's going to allow you $15,000 as a deposit to ultimately help you get into the market. So it is a good stepping stone to help you there. The next one is the first home concession, which basically means that you're going to get a discount or almost your stamp duty tax-free. Because it's wonderful here in Australia, every time we get to buy a piece of property, we get to pay stamp duty. So for first home buyers, if you're getting into it, you can take advantage of that. Now, the next one that we have is the new home loan deposit scheme. This came out around election time, which was fundamentally, people think it's another grant. It's not. If you've already saved up your 5% deposits, the government is going to go in there as an extra guarantor for another 15% deposit. Okay? So what that does is helps you get better lending without what's called mortgage insurance. So as a first home buyer, ideally, get the grant, use those concessions, and if you can't save up, then you can tap into what's known as the Super Saver Scheme. Superannuation, as we know, basically you put your money in each week and then you get it out at the end at 60, 65, depending on which government's on power. What they've opened up for the first home buyers is that you can actually put your money into a superannuation policy, get all those tax concession dollars for when you contribute into super, get the ability to build the money up faster because it is a superannuation, so you get a better return than you would like, in a cash savings account, and then you can redraw it at the end. Okay? You don't have to wait to 65, you can pull it out as a one-off hit and make sure that you've got it. So if you're getting into the first home buyers market, that's a good way of going. You can build it up with your super, you can use the grant. Ideally, there are 10,000 of those available with the new scheme, so everybody's lining that up because that kicks in January 1. Now, if all of that doesn't work, ask mum and dad, right? Now, if the mum and dad's in the room, if you do have kids and you're looking at thinking of helping them out, the general misconception is that you have to give them cash, and that's not the case. If you've got equity in your property already, you can do parental guarantors or equity lends that ultimately helps them get into the property. Okay? And if that property reaches a certain equity level over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be, they can be re-released from the security and the kids are off and running. So anybody that got kids in the room and you want to help them out, you don't necessarily need cash to do it. All I would say is if you are thinking of buying an investment home, maybe you look at potentially, do I buy a home first or an investment first? Because sometimes if you go down home as a home, you're in there, you're covering the costs, and it can be a long time before you start building equity or getting ahead, and you can struggle from a cash flow perspective. Where if you go down the path of potentially going into investment property first, you can build directly faster and maybe come back and buy your home so much sooner. So it's different ways of thinking about it. It's really up to you. Either way, getting into the market is a great way of getting ahead and buying property, whether it's investment first or not. So if we are going to buy a home, it's not complicated. Just remember that tiny little slide. Make sure that you love it. Now, what happens at First National, we have all these guides, we have all these tools to help you do it. Now, I'm a bit of a greenie at heart, so I try to make these seminars as paperless as we possibly can. So any help that you need in buying and selling, you can download these guides. But what I want to cover tonight is a very simple process of things that aren't in the guides to help you get your thought process right. First one, before you go shopping, is start doing a budget. You want to go to your broker and you want to find out what you can borrow, and that's what a good broker is going to do for you. But what's going to happen is you've got to want to know what you can cash flow, because there's a very big difference between what you can get from the banks to what you can actually service on an ongoing basis. I know that doing a budget is boring as hell, but it is a really, really important step to what you can do. And when you start doing those budgets and you sit there and go, gee whiz, I spent $53 on cafe lattes last week and $23 on, I don't know, was it Candy Crush or something? I don't know, whatever they are. Could you attribute that towards your home purchase? So being honest with yourself and getting your budget right is very, very important to making sure that you get the right home purchase. So once we've done that, what we want to do is create a wish list of what we want in our home. Now, we have the suburbs or we have the dwelling type. Now, the priorities are going to shift depending on who you are and what stage in your life. For a long time, well, even today, I travel all over the country and internationally doing these sorts of workshops. And for a long time, I just loved a water view. And I couldn't care less if I was in a one-bedroom box as long as I could see the water. That was my only priority. A few years ago, I met my lovely wife, and then I had a baby, and then 4 weeks later, I had another one. So the one-bedroom high-rise where children can climb over the balconies and not have a nursery doesn't work anymore. So my priorities have shifted to making sure I've got a backyard and a swing set and a bunch of rooms that the kids can play in, right? So when you're starting out, are you going to start out with dwelling sizes, i.e. rooms, or are you going to start out with locations? Then, what is your priority? Is your priority that you can commute to work in 5 minutes? Is your priority that it's in a good school zone? Is it your priority that it's looking at the water? Get your priorities right. Now, when we start creating that priority list, you want an A, B, and C list. You want the absolutes, right, which is I'm not going to compromise on. the wish list, and yeah, they're great. Because what's going to happen when you start doing this journey properly, you're going to sit there with the list, you've got your budgets, you've got your numbers, and then you have your wish list there. So when you come back to the team at First National here at Rochedale and say, righto, help me buy a home, we go in shopping, and they start showing you products, you don't flounder, you don't go, oh, I don't know, you know exactly what you want and you're ready to go straight away. Because when you have that confidence of knowing what you want, knowing what you can afford and what your priorities are, you can start assessing what's right for you. And then if your budget is, I don't know, $500,000, and then you start looking at products, then you can start comparing your A, B, and C list and do those products meet it? And if you've walked into that first home and it's ticked every one of those boxes, A, B, and C, and it's in your budget, bang. See Tony, see the team, negotiate, you're off and running, you can make a smart choice and take action on that product before somebody else does. Now, when you start going through that owner-occupied journey and you're walking through homes and those sorts of things, and it's not meeting all the criteria, what you can then start doing is looking at A, B, and C. What one am I going to start taking away so I can start looking at other options so you can still go through the home purchase. You've got to know what you're looking at. Oh, there's always one on the phone. That's all right. It was actually me last week. I always tell everyone to turn their phone off, and mine rang in the middle of the seminar, so that's okay. So make sure we get our priorities right. Then start thinking about your future self, okay? Because a home isn't like an investment property where you can trade in and out of them every 12, 18 months, 2 years, whatever your strategy is. A home, you're potentially going to be there 3, 5, 10, 20 years. Now, if you're starting out and, if you're that first home buyer and you're young and single, maybe it's an apartment, but maybe you're getting married and kids are starting to come along. Maybe the apartment isn't the right choice if you want the 2.3 kids and the dog, right? And if you're getting older and you've got the kids and they're starting to be 17 and 18 and you're kicking them very hard to get out of home and start their own life, and maybe they won't leave, maybe downsizing back into the 2 or 3 bedroom apartment might encourage them to spread their wings a little bit. Either way, start thinking about the choices, because if you can buy it, you're going to pay the stamp duties, you've got a lot of process to go through. So don't just go, this feels good today. Start thinking about tomorrow, the next day, the next few years of how your life might progress. So start thinking about that. And then once you've done all those sorts of things and you've worked out what you want to do, you can start assessing what are your priorities, what's looking at the stock, and then you've found your dream home and you're off and running. Then it's just a simple negotiation process. And that's easy, because that's what the team of First Nationals here is going to be for you. If you can fast track the process, and it's funny because people going through that owner-occupied journey generally spend 3 to 6 months. And they go out and look at homes and they start not sure what they're wanting. And then they come back 2 or 3 months later and go, gee whiz, I wish I had that first one. I just didn't realise it. And the first one's gone. So if you've done this prep work first on budgeting, planning, talking to your partners, working out where you want to be, when you actually go out and start looking at those homes, and if you do see the right one that ticks the box, you don't have to go away and think about it, and you can secure it, and that's what the team will do for you. So combining your head with your heart will make sure that you get a better home at a better price and the best finance deal you can, and then you can just take action and move forward on. So the only other question that you might ask yourself is the dream home actually the right financial decision for me? Is going into this and leveraging myself up as hard as I can going to affect my future self? Can I look after the kids? Can I provide for my retirement? And these are the questions that we don't often ask when we go to our home because we're so emotionally caught up into it. And as long as you ask yourself is, can I do my budgets? Can I do it? And can I fund my future life and my quality of life? Then you're off and running. So, getting the money for it. How does finance work? Now, for probably 15 years of my life, I actually used to do seminars in the banks. Westpac, NAB, all these people used to bring all their clients, and I used to stand up in the banks. So what we've got a bit of an understanding is how it works behind the scenes. So I'm going to try and give you an understanding of how banks work. How much can I get? Basically, banks work on two different criteria. The first one's known as loan to value ratio. The other one is debt servicing ratio. LVR and DSR. Right? LVR is fundamentally how much skin have you got in the game. So when you're going to go out to buy a home for the first time, whether it's a home or investment, you're going to need to put some cash in. Right? So if you put, in that scenario, 500,000, you put 100 grand in, LVR. Now it's funny because most people try to push to that LVR of 20% to avoid mortgage insurance, but you don't have to do that. That just affects your cash flow, not your capital growth or what you can get into. So LVR is how much money you put into it. The next step in the LVR equation is what's known as a combined loan to value ratio. Now, some people in the room might have properties already and they're thinking about buying another one. And generally the biggest hurdle they think is that, gee, is that first time out of the gate, you know, I say for 2 or 3 years, I busted my ass, I really had to work hard to get into that property. How the heck am I going to do it again? What happens if you have a property already, you can use the security of that property or equity in it to go and buy another property without the deposit. It's known as a combined loan to value ratio. So if you have a home already at 600,000 and you owe 450 on it, your LVR is 75. If you went out and bought a property and borrowed not just the purchase price, but all the costs on top of that, you would now have a combined LVR. So it's the total value of the property. So if your home's 600, the new property's 400, you've got property worth $1 million. Debt combined, you've got a total debt of 870, so you've gone to a total LVR from 75 to 87. That's how it works. So this is fundamentally how a lot of people leapfrog into additional properties without having to find that hard deposit. Right? You just use the security that's already there and you're off and running. Now the other one is DSR, which is debt servicing ratio. This is, can you pay the loan back? It's not complicated. Now, if you've got $100,000 coming in and you're spending 101, well, you're probably not going to get any more money because you're already overextending yourself. Right? That's just the reality of how it works. Banks work on ratios and percentages. Now, up until probably 6 months ago, when you went for a finance application, they would just look at the mathematics. So they would go, okay, this is your income, you know, wages, or if you're self-employed, maybe you're renting a room out, possibly you've got a shared portfolio giving you an annuity. And then they go, well, what's your expenses? Okay, you've got a mortgage, you've got a car loan. But in the recent times, they're actually going through your expenses. How much did you spend on Uber Eats last week? What did you spend on Netflix? So if anybody is out there at the moment thinking of doing a mortgage in the next few months, eat at home, stop ordering things in because the banks are going to start looking at it. It's a real criteria. Now, one is, how do we avoid the DSR scenario? Does anybody know what's the most detrimental thing to getting a loan from a bank? Is anybody out there? No? Any thoughts? What do you think they're going to hurt you? Credit rating? Yeah?
Credit cards.
Credit cards? Yes, cut them up. So on the credit card department, it's important to understand that when a bank looks at you, they're not going to look at the debt, they're going to look at the limit, okay? So you might owe nothing on it, but you've got 20 or 30 grand's worth of credit cards, they're going to assess you at 20 or 30 grand's worth of debt straight away. So if you're going to go for a loan application, get your credit cards reduced, buy your property, and then put them back up again. That's not the most detrimental thing, it's actually children. There you go. So, $20,000 a year. So if you've got kids still living at home and they're 17 and 18 years old, make sure they move into their friend's house while you're doing a mortgage application. Okay? So how does it all string together? Basically, what you've got to do before you buy anything is what's known as a borrowing capacity. Right? Now, this is where people often confuse a pre-approval to a borrowing capacity. What a pre-approval is that you walk in and you say, hi, I want to buy a property, and the first thing that the bank manager is going to do is say, what you need is to get a pre-approval done, so you can go up there and buy confidence. So you've actually done a mortgage application.
That's
This
exactly how they sound too.
Yeah, that's right. The official bank manager, yes. I put my stern voice on, right? Oh, so it's different if you're getting the application. They go, would you like to do that application? It's only when you're paying the bill that they go like that. So, a pre-approval is an application for finance, but it is still subject to valuations, okay? So you still don't get a full approval. What a borrowing capacity is going out to all the banks first and finding the best deal. Now, the best deal has a few things to it. One is how much can you borrow, what is the interest rate, and what's the flexibility or the structure of the loan. So what you need to do is not necessarily go just to one bank, but go to all of them. Because this is what I learned from the inside of the banking industry. In the old days, it used to be you go and see your bank manager and you process the loan and he could approve it then and there because that's what a bank manager did. The bank managers these days are ultimately paper and information collectors. All of the information moves up to credit. Now, what you've got to understand with banks is that banks are in the business of lending money, but they're also assessing their own risk. So what goes on in the banking world and the departments of credit high up the food chain is that if Westpac has, I don't know, they've lent a lot of money to people in yellow shirts this week and they've lent it in Browns Plains, somewhere up in credit goes, we actually don't want to lend anymore to leather shirts in Browns Plains anymore. But ANZ over there goes, hang on, I haven't lent anything to yellow shirts and Browns Plains, we'll give you the money, we'll make it easier for you. So banks are continually turning the money on and off in different locations from different times of the week. So what you need to do is assess not one bank, but all of them. So we had a client that came to us and she said to me, Aaron, can you help me find a nice property for $290,000? I said, yes, of course, Mary, you can do that. Wonderful. What would you like? What do you want to do? What's your criteria? Went through the journey with her. But one of the first questions I asked her was, Mary, why have you come up with a figure of $290,000? And she said, well, look, I went down to Bill and he was my Westpac bank manager for 25 years and he's a great bloke and, he just said, that's what you're going to get. I went, great, did you compare? And she went, no. I said, would you like to? And she said, what's the point? I'm not going to get any more than that. And I said, well, would you like to find out? It'll take almost 20 minutes. And she said, right. So what we did, we got all the information, we put it through the finance system, and we actually found out across all of the different banks, she could borrow $560,000. Same person, same day, just across the different banks, there was a huge difference. Now that's the difference between an average home or a good one, or an investment property, or potentially two. So the real criteria is make sure that you go and shop banks and brokers. Now, one of the biggest things that they're going to shop you on is not whether you spent $20 on Uber Eats last night, but the valuations on properties. So these are real live valuations that we got from Mary. Same property, same day, across 3 different lenders, and there was $110,000 difference in valuations. Mind-blowing, okay? So when you're shopping banks, we often get confused with trying to shop 0.1%, 0.2% or a $300 application fee. That's insignificant in the scheme of things. But 100, 110, 150,000. Now, if you've got 1, 2 or 3 properties and you're getting that sort of swing on them, that's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity that you're not tapping into or not utilising. So when you're going out there, do it, make sure that you shop the right thing. So equity is really the key because it's going to determine how much you get and what rate and what structure. So don't go to a bank. I'm not saying that you don't see your friendly Westpac guy or BOQ because he's your mate. I've got no problems with that at all, but compare them and shop them. So what you want to do in shopping a broker is ask them a very few simple questions. Firstly, do they have platinum status? Now, what platinum status will do is it allow them to shop all of the banks at one time and organise those valuations for you up front free of charge. So what happens then is that you can compare all these banks, get all your valuations done and work out now what's the best deal. Then, are they a specialist or are they a jack of all trades, master of none? So maybe you're thinking of doing a house and land package. So do they know how to do that? Are you thinking of buying a property in a self-managed super fund? So they do know how to do lending. Maybe you're selling your home at Rochedale today and thinking about buying a property in Sydney or GC or, I don't know, living up in Darwin. So can they do interstate? Do they know the different styles of lending? Do they know debt reduction? Do they know restructuring? All these sorts of elements. So it's very important that you don't just go to the local guy that just specialises in one thing, but they can do all the jobs, do it well, and make sure that you're getting the best deal in the market. So ideally, if you've got a broker, wonderful. If you don't have one, don't worry, because First National can help you out. A lot of people don't know that First National does have a finance division. We do. We can do all of that for you and make sure that's all smooth. But we've also got some other brokers in tonight. Hello? No? Chief? No way? So feel free to crash tackle them at the end of the night and get them haggling on some loans for you. But either way, whether it's an investment property or your own home, make sure that you get the best deal out there. Because the reality now, does anybody in the room have a mortgage? Yeah? Do you want a better one? Yeah. It's worth spending 20 minutes to find out what you can do. All right? So investment property. Okay. Investment property is a very different vehicle to your home because it's there to make your money. So I don't use the words investment property in my vocabulary simply because the moment I say an investment property to someone, they hear property, but somewhere in their subconscious up here, they hear home. So they start applying exactly the same criteria as they would searching for the home. Do I want to retire there? Does it make me feel good? Do I like the colour of the paint? None of that is relevant. That's why I simply call it a widget. A widget, in my terminology, is just an interchangeable tool to do the job. It's really odd. I've been doing this for a bloody long time now. I mean, I've built throughout Australia and New Zealand probably 25,000 houses, and I don't even like property. I don't. It bores the hell out of me. Right? Anytime says, let's go to an open home, we'll go through a house, I go, no thank you, I'm going to go and play with some toys, right? Be with my wife and kids. Property for investment is simply a money-making vehicle. So what you need to do is shift your thought process to being emotionally attached to the product, get emotionally attached to the result. So what you need to focus on, I'm going to give you a couple of tools tonight to utilise. We don't care what the widget is. We just want the widget to give me what it is, which is more money for my family, a better home, a better quality of life. So focus on the result, not the actual product. Now the next step is getting through the path of buying one. This is the biggest hurdle. It's so funny, we will cancel our favourite kid's birthday party, not watch State of Origin, because we're going to go to an open home because we love it. And we will do anything we can, and we'll be up 6 o'clock in the morning and be the first in the queue. But when it comes to an investment property, it's always on the back burner. We're always thinking, yeah, I like one, but you never take action on wants. We always take action on needs. So what you should be asking yourself is not, do I want one, but do I need one? Now, I'd sort of take that to the next step, which is not do you need an investment property, do you need more money? Now, financial freedom. It's funny because these two words, financial freedom, generally in a workshop like this or a seminar, we roll out pretty pictures of Porsches and travels and, you know, cruise ships and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, when I did stuff in America, the culture's so different because, you know, I roll into America and, come on, people, yeah, it's money, yeah. I do that in Australia and they all go, what a wank. Right? Financial freedom, yes, is toys. Yes, it's lifestyle. But that's not what real financial freedom is. And freedom for me when it comes to your finances is maintaining your quality of life when the income stops. So here's a little litmus test for you. When you go home, do your budget, work out what it costs. So in your own mind now, what does it cost me to run my house? I don't know, $500 a week in a mortgage or rent, food, electricity, some car payments. So maybe it's $1,000 a week. Then you open up your banking app and you go, I've got $5 grand. $5,000 divided by $1,000 a week, you have 5 weeks of financial freedom. Then, pick your kids up from kindy because you didn't pay the bill. Watch your car get towed down the road and knock at the door at the bank because you couldn't do things. That's when we start making bad choices because we don't have it set up. So for me, ultimately, financial freedom is really what you do everything so you can have the home, so you can look after your kids. Now, we don't have 100 people here in the room tonight, but I did have a last one. So generally I make a silly joke like 62 people have to stay to the end of the night. 29 of you can leave because when you reach retirement, you have no financial problems at all. But 1% of you do need to stay, right? And the 1% of you is wealthy. So what does wealthy mean? If you've got a check each week on an ongoing income, what would be the number on the check? What do you think? If you're a rich person, each week comes in, what do you think, sir? $2 grand? Any advance on $2 grand? It's a better option, right? According to Australian Bureau of Statistics, it's $800 a week. That's what wealth is.
That's that next on the back.
That's it. Okay. 80% of the rooms that you walk into from now and then, look around because 80% of the people in retirement are $333 a week. Now, over the years, I would talk 20 minutes, 30 minutes about this subject, and generally you walk out and it would mean nothing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the tools to find out how to do it. Now, if you want to log on to the website, now you can do this exercise yourself, but I'm just going to run through it with you now to show how it works. Now, anybody can get access to this. It's just simply online. This exercise here is something, if you actually take 5 minutes of your life, will change your life. So, current income. So what are we at now? I don't know, $80,000 a year. There's no right answer to this. This is yours. Now, as we go through this, just mentally tick them off in your head. Ideal retirement income. Now, I don't know, are you one of those believers that you don't need as much, or because you've got more time on your hand, you need more? Maybe it's $65,000. Minimum retirement income. Now, this is what I do. This is financial freedom, to keep the lights on, the food running, and most people go, gee whiz, even though I own my own home, I don't have a mortgage anymore, but it still puts its hand out each week and says, put electricity in me, pay my rates, love me, look after me, and if you want to keep eating, so what's the number? Generally in Australia today, most people think that they need 50 grand a year. So where are we at the moment? I don't know, maybe I've got a home worth 500,000, I owe 250 on it. I might have an investment property, where are we today? I don't know, Browns, Plains, Marsden, possibly. Okay, so investment property, maybe that's worth 300. Okay, we've got a debt there of 150. Shares, possibly we got 30 grand's worth of Telstra shares. Superannuation these days is about 100,000. Cash, maybe 3 grand tucked under the bed somewhere. Now, other is anything that you can sell to eat, right? Watches, vintage cars, I don't know, that extra kidney that you weren't using, or the third child you didn't like. Either way.
What about your wine collection?
Wine collection, yes. Well, that's a hard one to give up. Now, credit cards, that's not the limit. That's your debt. So $5,000 worth of credit cards. So where are we at the moment? If you've got nearly $1 million worth of assets and you owe 400, your net financial position is 533,000. Now, this is what financial freedom is ongoing income of the net asset. So what's going on in Australia at the moment is so many people are retirement age and they don't have enough money to keep going, so they're selling their homes up or getting reverse mortgages on them. Now, if you sold every little bit of asset up and you put that in the bank, you've got a 5% net return, you'd be living on $26,000 a year. But you won't be living in your home anymore because you've sold it. So this is the starting point, working out where you are and what are the right decisions about buying homes or whether you need to invest. The next step is quite simple. How much do we need to get? So if we just click on the bottom of the next page, if we want $65,000 a year, you would need $1 million giving you 5%. Now, there's not many places out there that you get a 5% return net. So if you want to be more conservative, put it at 2.5, you'd actually need 2.6 million. So I need 65, that's my income. Where am I at? If I need 2.6 and I've got 530, that means I need to generate $2 million to have an ongoing income. Okay, how old am I? All right, so I don't know, what are we, 45? I want to retire at 65. That means over the next 20 years for retirement, you would need to make $100,000 a year, year in, year out. That's the reality, okay? The reason I try to do this exercise, and I encourage everybody to go out, get online, do it with a piece of paper, it doesn't matter, is because now you can start making smart choices around your homes or whether or not you need to invest in property or not, based on where you're at and where you need to be. So, go to that one for the moment. Let's go back to our workshop. So, if the question now is, I do need more money because I want a better home and I need a good retirement, how do I invest in property? So, here's a crash course on how to invest in property safely and successfully. Bible your head, not your heart. Keep your heart to your home. If we're going to do it, start selecting the best one for you, not the one that you want. Okay? We justify our decisions all the time as I want to retire there, or I like it, or it's a second home. It's simply about making money. Now, when it comes to investment property, I'm not going to cover all the categories tonight, renovations and all those sorts of things, or old or new, because every strategy has its positives and has its negatives. What I want to express for you tonight is the strategy that you have is different from one that you have and the one that you have, because you're all in different positions of life. So all I can say to you is don't worry what your brother did, what your cousin did, what you did last year, what's relevant to you now. So very, very important. Now, let's deal with some simple fundamentals of how it works. The first one is the cash flow, right? How do we pay for it? Because when we're buying our own home, you're the only one that pays for it. So it's always a struggle. If you're considering buying an investment property, then you go, how do I pay for it? Because it's tough enough as it is. With an investment property, we have other people helping us out. Now, obviously, the tenant's pretty self-explanatory. You and the tax man. So how does the tax work? When you buy an investment property, you're entitled to what's known as tax deductions. This is where this whole negative gearing thing comes in. There's two types of deductions. One are the physical money that you spend to run it, the interest on the loan, the rates, the insurance, your property management costs, and this is where maintenance comes in. If you're thinking of buying a really old property and you go, I'm not going to worry about the maintenance because it's deductible, it's not a good plan because you've got to spend the money first and you're only going to get a percentage of it back. The good deductions are what's known as depreciation because they don't cost you anything out of pocket. Right? Now, how does it work when a potential rebate kicks in? If you have a current income, you will pay tax. If you bought the property in your own name, the rental income is going to increase your taxable income. So if you're on 100, the rent's 20 grand, now your taxable income is 120. If the investment property that you bought and the deductions are less than the rent, you're going to end up paying more tax. If the deductions are greater than the rent, then you're going to have a lower taxable income and be entitled to a tax rebate. So for people that understand numbers, if you're on 100 and the rent's 20, but the deductions are 40, you're still earning 100, but now you're only paying tax on 80, and that's where you get the rebate from. Now, this is where investment property strategy starts to get a bit more exciting because this formula can replicate itself. Right? So investment property number 1, you're on 100 plus 20 minus 80. Investment property number 2, you're already starting at 80, not on 100, so 80 plus 20 minus 40, you're now down to 60. So the reality is, if you get your portfolio and you're starting to build that up, you can get yourself to a zero taxable income. Right? I'm not saying buy an investment property to avoid paying tax. All I'm saying is if you're already paying tax at the moment, utilise that to build your wealth to fund your lifestyle. Now, the other part of cash flow with investment properties is generally you get that investment property rebate at the end of the financial year. The problem with that is that, you know, you might be out of pocket $100 a week, and at the end of the year you get a lump sum, and generally people spend it. If you're a salaried employee, you can actually get that tax rebate in advance. So, for example, if you're going to get a $5,200 tax rebate, you can apply to the tax office, and what the tax office does is they send a letter to your paymaster or paymistress instead of saying, instead of taking $200 a week out, let's only take $100 a week out. And you actually get a pay rise straight away, which you can then put towards your investment property. So it helps you from your cash flow perspective. Now, when we're thinking of a percentage return, we generally miss the biggest points and we think about a number. So if it's fixed interest in the bank, I don't know, what is that, 2 or 3 or 4%, you know, what would we consider a good return? So if you're going to invest, ladies and gentlemen, what would you want? What do you think is a good number? What was it? 100%? Good, I like that. Okay. Generally, the rule of thumb is 5, 10, 20% that most people think, right? Now, when it comes to return on investment, we get the things out of whack. So what I want to do is a little example. The real test of return on investment is how much money do you pull out of your pocket and how much you get back. So I'll get someone to help me on this one. Does anybody have $10 in their purse or wallet?
Yeah, am I going to get it back though?
No? Come on, let's find out. Okay. You got one?
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, ladies first. She got into the punch. That's all right. So this is what investing is in reality. You pull your wallet out, all right? And if you pull $10 out and made a bad investment, you'd sit right back down. Okay. So $10 in. If you got your $10 back, that's the start of a good investment because you didn't lose any money. But if you got $10 in and you got another $10, was that 100% of your money? Yeah? Makes sense? No confusion there? Right. This is where the confusion kicks in. We put the $10 in, but maybe that investment, oh, I've got green ones today, my wife did grade the wallet, that's good. Right? Let's say the investment actually made $100. But then, through the course of the investment, we had to pay all these bills, capital gain tax, property management fees, blah, blah, blah. And out of that 100, it all got eaten up in fees and charges. But your $10 is back, we paid the fees and charges, and then you get another $10 back after everything's done. What did you make of your money? You made, how much? 100% of your money, didn't you? Well, no, let's say after all your tax, all your fees and everything, and all the bills, whatever's left over is 10. You made 100%, didn't you? Okay, cool. No, you get 10. No, you got a first phone call. Oh, right. Well, okay, follow him. The reason I do this example is that because what happens when people look at investing, they look at the criteria versus what's the real investment. How much money did I put in versus I get back? Now, when it comes to investment property, we have 2 little helping things to help us get across the line. The first one is what's known as leverage or gearing. Now, if you're going to put $1,000 a week into the bank, you're going to get 5% on the $1,000, right? With an investment property, you're getting the growth on the value of the asset, not what it's costing you. Now, my favourite is what's known as other people's money. The bank's going to give you most of the money, if not all of it. The rent is going to help you service it, along with the tax man. So you have all these other people building your nest egg up. So let's put this into perspective. Glasses? Okay, I'm just going to run some numbers for you here, which will just do a simple cash flow. Okay. Now, I do these examples all over the country. So when I do in Sydney and I talk about 500,000, you get a driveway. I'm out to Chinchilla next week and you can probably buy the town. So we're just going to do an example. So let's say we bought a property at 500,000. You're going to have your purchase costs there of stamp duties, legal fees, transfer of titles. Now, in this scenario, let's just say that we've got a home already, so we're not going to put any extra cash in, and we're going to borrow everything. So we're going to borrow all of our costs and everything. Capital growth rate, don't worry about that for the moment. The average, fundamentally, through Australia for the last 100 years is 7%. And I'll cover that in a second. Inflation, I built in inflation, so all of our costs are going up. Then we've got our bills. Now, Steve, what's the interest rate these days? Interest only? 4.5. Okay, so I'll put it at 4.5, but in fact, bugger that. I'm a worst case scenario sort of guy. Let's put it at 5%. Okay, so we've built some extra room to move in there and a bit of a security blanket. Now, our rental expenses, I know this is a little bit hard to see, but what you want to do is pay a good property manager to look after it for you. You've got some rates, and this one here, insurance. Now, with a house or an investment property, whether it's a unit or not, you don't necessarily need insurance for contents, because if the TV gets stolen, that's their problem, but you want to make sure it doesn't burn down. Now, one insurance that most people forget about or don't know about is what's known as landlord protection insurance. So if you've got a bad tenant, they trash your house or they don't pay you the rent, the insurance is going to look after you on it. So if you've got an investment property and you don't have landlord protection insurance, get it tomorrow, okay? It's anywhere from like 280 to 350, so I'll just average that out at 300. So we've got some insurance there. Okay. Now this is where we have depreciation. So a $500,000 property, you're going to get between 30 and 40,000, depending on what sort of property it is. So I'll just make it an average. Now, loan costs, depending on where you are, you would either borrow your loan costs, or if you've got a good broker, there may not be loan costs. So I'm going to put some extra fat in that as well. As you can see, I'm a bit pretty aggressive on that. Tax credit of 100,000. So let's do the maths. The interest at 5% is going to cost us $26,000. We've got $5,000 worth of additional costs to make sure that everything's running smoothly. So it's costing us $21,000 a year. Now, $8,000 shortfall. But this is where we look at it. We've got $23,000 in rent, but we've got $45,000 worth of deductions, which means we've got an overall loss of $20,000, which means that you're going to get a tax rebate of $8,000 a year. So now that investment property is now cash flow neutral. So you put no money in, we've covered all of our costs, we worry about all those sorts of things, and you're still neutral. So it's a pretty powerful thing. Now, one of the biggest problems that people have when they invest in property is not getting a tenant. Because generally what happens is that they do market assessments and they talk themselves up. So let's say that property at $500,000 on market might be $500 a week. So the first thing that you should do when you're looking at a potential rental property is A, go to the local office in the area and say, I'm thinking of buying this, what do you think the market assessment is going to be? So they're going to generally give you a range between probably $430 to $450 a week, whatever the number is. Now, what I always encourage is that if the market assessment from your local expert, and that's where you've got First National on your team, if they're coming at you and saying, look, you're going to get rented at $430 a week, work on $410, $420 on your cash flows. Always be ultra conservative so that you make sure that you get a tenant all day, every day, right? Because the market can shift. Because let me show you the effect on this. Let's say our market rent of our $500,000 property is actually $480. We've budgeted on $450. But if I then swing that back down to $425 a week, well, now I'm only negative $400 a year. So let's be even more conservative, guys, right? Let's do our assessment on, I don't know, $400 a week. Are we going to get a tenant now if all the other properties around us are renting for $450, $460 and you've got one there at $400? They'll be queued up down the street. Now, I'm not saying not to maximise your rental return, but $5 or $10 a week is not going to build your wealth. It's $5 or $10 a week out of your cash flow. That's not the point of it. The cash flow for an investment property is to allow you to build capital growth. So always be ultra conservative on your property management. Talk to the local experts, and whatever they tell you be below the market, they're still going to achieve the best they can for you. But you don't want to be sitting there waiting for your property for 10, 20 bucks a week, get it rented tomorrow. Now let's put this into perspective. That property is costing you $23 a week or $1,200 a year, okay? You didn't put any money up front, but it's costing you $1,200. So in 10 years' time, you would have spent $12,000. Now, on the average capital growth rate of 7%, in 10 years' time, your property would be worth $983,000. We didn't pay anything off the interest bill, so we've got to pay the bank back $524,000. So you're left with $459,000. Now, you wanted 100% on your money. If you put 12 grand in, what would 100% of your money be? Okay, so if you put 12 grand in and got 450 grand back, is that more than 100%? It's a lot more, yeah? Right. So again, this is where to be conservative. If the average capital growth rate is 7%, okay, let's cut it in half. It's down to 3.5%. Would you spend 12 grand to make maybe 200,000? What if you threw 30 or 40 grand in capital gains tax? Would you still be happy putting 12 grand in to potentially make 100 grand? Bloody oath you would. And that's the power of property. That's the real key to it. Is when you look at that simple exercise of $10 in, $10 out, what's your overall return? So the key, ladies and gentlemen, is not necessarily the cash flow, but the overall return on investment. Simply, I'll put it in another way. If we bought our investment property for $500,000, we borrowed 20 grand, it's going to cost us 26 grand a year, plus our cost, 31 outgoing. Rental income, if we even kept it at $430 a week, get a tax rebate in, 29, so we're short for $1,200 a year. So the same sort as the software. If we got a 5% growth, that means our net worth has gone up 25. So 25 less our initial investment leaves 23. 23 divided by what we've got means you've got an 1,800% return on your money. It's not tricks, it's not sales pitch, it's not snake oil, it's mathematics based on leverage, gearing, and other people's money. If I pull the rate back to 2.5%, we'd still be at 924. If we got the average capital growth rate, we'd be at 483,000. The point of the exercise, ladies and gentlemen, is we often chase the wrong things from our investment strategy, which is our rental property. We've got two beside us. One's renting at $510 a week, the other one's renting at $550 a week. I'll take the one at $550. $5 doesn't change your life, but capital growth does. So that's what you need to be chasing with an investment property. So how do you get more capital growth? Residential investment property is what most people turn to. Commercial is a great investment, but it's more a yield-based investment. If you're a developer, well, you've got to have the tools, and you're probably not even in the room tonight because you're a developer. You might come to one of these. So most people turn to residential. Why does it work? Simple. Everybody needs a home. Now, when I started doing this, 26% of the population rented. Now it's close to 50. It's 48.7. And they're expected in 25 years, 70% of Australians will be in rental property. So everybody needs a home. So the question now is, which one do we choose? What will go up the most? Does anybody have any thoughts? Is a high-rise, small growth, or a house, or a duplex? What do we think?
House.
House. Why do we think that? Land. Land goes up, buildings appreciate. Yeah, that's true. And ultimately, what we've got to think of. Now, what happens in real life is that we often make the mistake of buying a property today, but what we want to do is buy a property to sell tomorrow. So what we've got to think about is who is the right people that we want to sell to. Who's better or who's going to pay more, an investor or an owner-occupier? An owner-occupier, because they get emotionally attached, right? They keep bidding and bidding because it's our home, we want it, we want to justify it. How many owner-occupiers in Australia want one-bedroom units? One. I was one of them, but a very small percentage, right? It's not necessarily the land these days. And yes, you're right, Tony, land goes up, but it's actually the dwellings, right? What we're looking for is 2 or 3 bedrooms and a double lock-up garage, ideally 4 or 5 bedrooms and a triple lock-up garage, right? So it depends on your lifestyle, but what we want is as many buyers as we possibly can, and we want as many people as we possibly can to spend too much on them because they're emotionally attached. So that's why when you're thinking of a dwelling, think about who am I going to sell to and who's going to pay the most. The next one is the location. So how do we choose a location? So if we're considering a location, is it better to choose one location or compare 3 or 4?
3 or 4.
3 or 4? So would it be better to then compare 10 or 20 different locations to explore our options? Maybe, maybe not. Confusion. So how do we not get confused? We need a comparison list, don't we? So if I'm looking at more than one, even if it's 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, what you've got to do is be analytical about it and sit there and go, how do I know what's the best one? So we start with a list. Now, when I was 18 and I was chasing capital growth, I just went, I need some capital growth, so I need a checklist. I just call it a capital growth checklist. Everybody's different. So what should we put on that checklist? What do we think is important for a suburb to go up? Any thoughts? Schools, transport, job opportunities. What else? 3. We need a bigger list than that. Huh? Infrastructure. What's infrastructure? Because that's a word. Schools, shopping centres. Okay. So everybody generally starts with infrastructure, but don't put infrastructure on the checklist, put the elements. So it's important to buy in an area that's got some jobs. So don't buy in small one-horse mining towns if something closes down, the town dies. You want to make sure that you've got lots of jobs. Does anybody know that someone's moved into a suburb because of the schools run? Okay. Right. So schools are important. Shopping centres, public transport, medical facilities. Recreational, I actually got this wrong. Pubs and taverns should be in the recreational department. Ratio to the city, ratio to airports. You actually want to be close to an airport but not on it unless you're Dale Carrigan, right? So a bit of a castle reference there. So infrastructure. Then we have supply and demand. So supply is the available products for sale there at any one time. But more importantly, and this is where things get wrong, is the zoning. Because you might have that beautiful leafy suburb at the moment, but all of a sudden zoning's gone through and you've got 20 or 30 high-rises or a bunch of townhouses, so it affects the supply-demand ratio. The other one's demand, which is the amount of people buying. So population growth is huge because there's more buyers out there trying to do it. And that's why fundamentally cities versus small country towns are much better because there's more buyers. Ratio of owner-occupiers to investors. Very, very important, because if you've got a suburb full of owner-occupiers, the suburb is much better, because any of the owner-occupiers in the room, you'll know what we're doing Saturday, Sunday, we mow the lawns, we paint and look after it. Tenants do not. The ratio of owner-occupiers to investors is also important for rental returns, because if you've got an area that's been overflooded with investment properties, because that was sold or whatever it is, and there's 100 of those available for rent and only one owner-occupier, the market rent's going to drop, okay? So make sure that you get that ratio right. Now, one thing that we don't actually look at is property cycles, because this actually should be the starting point. People don't even consider it. In Australia, property goes round in a circle or a cycle. On average, a property cycle will take 8 to 12 years to complete the loop, okay? Now, sometimes the loop happens in 3 to 6 years. Sometimes it takes 12 to 15. That's why they say property averages every 10. Now, this is where to look at it in more detail. The reality of a cycle is half of the cycle it's going down. So you're not actually making any money on that. The other part of the cycle it's actually going up. So the reality is that property doubles every 3 to 6 years, not every 10. So this is where you're starting to affect homeowners versus investors of the decisions that you make. If you are in a home and you're looking at buying it and staying in the same suburb, the cycles aren't going to affect you at all because you're selling at the same rate as you buy. If you're looking at selling, but you want to know that the market's running down, that's where you go back to your team at First National Rochedale and say, I need a much more aggressive marketing strategy and I'm willing to put a lot more into it up front because I know that in 2 weeks, 2 months, 3 years later, it's actually going to be worth less. So making sure that your cycles are there, and even in reverse, even if the market's going up and you're sitting there with Tony or the team and they're going, look guys, you want to sell your home. The best way to sell a home is get more buyers into it, and it is going up, the market's moving, so maybe let's put an extra few $1,000s into our marketing plan or a bit of strategy so we can get more buyers there and ultimately get more money. Now, when it comes to investment property, it's a very different strategy. I've heard every seminar that's going around, and the vast majority of property seminars, what they say is, it doesn't matter where you buy in the cycle. Now, I agree with that up until a certain point. If you buy at the top of the cycle and you hold it for a complete cycle, you're going to make money. Yes. But the trouble is that if you buy at the top of the cycle and the shit hits the fan and you're forced to sell, you're probably going to lose money. Now, if you're buying an investment property and you want to buy more investment properties and you need equity, you're not getting any equity. So that's pointless. So if you're going to go down the path of buying properties, certainly for investment, you need to be in the rising part of the cycle because even the worst ones go up, and that's the reality. Probably the best example would be Sydney, Mount Druitt. I'm sure anyone saw Struggle Street on SBS. It was as bad as it got, right? And yet, in a rising market, that went from 220 to 560 in a 3-year period, okay? Bit closer to home, I remember when I kicked off, it was Forest Lake. And I was out there selling the woods and the trees and all those sorts of things, and Nala was beside it. And everyone's going, oh, man, it's bloody rough, and Nala's beside it. And then the infrastructure came and the growth cap, and Nala went from 20 grand to 120 grand simply because of Forest Lake next door and the infrastructure growth, right? So it's a very, very powerful thing to pick the cycles wrong. So if you want to make money, stop looking in areas that are on a downward cycle, just focus on the cities and the upward cycle. So this is interesting because they're all at different stages. Now, we can trade our homes, buy and sell in different locations, and we're going to be affected by that. But when it comes to investment property, we're not affected by where we want to live. So we can now choose our widget and take it anywhere. So it doesn't matter if it's in Sydney or Melbourne or Perth or Darwin or GC, as long as that's in the rising part of the market. Now that's very tough to read. Sorry, the screen's not there. But that property cycle, you can download off the websites. It's inherent side-wide. Anybody that's interested tonight, I can forward that all to you. So the reality is, just pick something that side as opposed to that side, and you're already in front. And same thing goes with units. Now, another part of the tool is core logic updates. So First National, again, will supply all of these things for you. So if you want to watch movies and see what's going on, those updates are there for you. The best resource, though, is not up on the screen. I can tell you the best resource to get real-time information is actually your local real estate agents, because they're on the ground all day, every day. They know what market's going on. They know what's happening. So if you want to know how hot the market is, talk to your local team at First National, because they're the ones that can be able to do it for you. So how do I choose one? Let me make this quite simple. Location A, right place in the cycle, lots of schools, lots of jobs, lots of population growth, train stations, hospital, pubs, everything. Location C, doesn't have any jobs, there's lots of stock, they're overpriced, and ain't going anywhere. Where should we buy? Anybody else?
Hey.
Just check. Was that an emotional choice or a logical choice? Logical. All you're doing is doing the research, doing the due diligence to compare what's right for you. Now, this is where the other factor is time, because so many people do their research on what the suburb has been doing. Unless you've got a time machine, and if you do, you've already heard this presentation, so it's okay, right? Stop looking at the past, look to the future, because if you've done the research for the future, you realise that location B in 3 years' time has actually got more schools, more shops, more jobs. And then if you fast track that 10 years down the track, you'll have 300. Now, what would be the closest to home? Springfield. I was out at Springfield 17, 18 years ago when Delphin launched and was standing by a lake, and gee whiz, there was nothing there. There's half a town, and in the next sort of 5, 10 years, it will be bigger than Darwin. It's its own self-contained city. So what you've got to do is look for future infrastructure, what's happening, what's moving forward. But this is where you've got to look at your own plan. You know, I was talking to clients the last few days from my Toowoomba seminar, and I'm sitting there talking to a 65-year-old. They don't have 10 years to make their growth. So there's no point looking at suburb C, look at suburb B or A. So you've got to match this to yourself, you've got to do the research in advance, and then you're off and running. Now, the other way to help you sort of build your nest eggs is with self-managed super funds. A self-managed super fund is basically superannuation, but you can control your asset class. The rules around a super are the same, being how much you can contribute to it, when you can pull it out. Now, that will be determined by who's in power. If you're in a normal share portfolio, or a normal stock market or superannuation policy, your investment is in shares. If you set up a self-managed super fund, now you can choose your asset class. So you can put it in cash, you can put it in shares, or you can buy a property direct, right? Now you can also expand your strategy further if you want by leverage and gearing, because banks will actually lend to a self-managed super fund. So if you've only got 200 or 250 grand in it, you ain't going to get much of the property for that. So you could then go and borrow 70% and now buy a property at 500,000 or 600,000. And if you hold your property till retirement phase, capital gains tax free. Okay? So buying property in a super is a good way of protecting them. Now, again, a client I had, actually, what was it this morning we were talking to, they had their money, they were set up, they weren't into growth, but what they want to do is protect their nest egg because they've been through GFCs and stock market crash and they've just seen their nest egg wiggle away. So that's the other advantage of property. So, how do we reduce the risks? If you're going to enter into a contract, you're going to need a lawyer. Now, a normal house and land is a pretty simple contract, just a normal property that's sitting there. Make sure you get building and pest inspections on. But if your contract's starting to get a bit more complex, pay the extra $200 or $300 and get a good solicitor to review them and understand what you're getting into. I've seen so many people over the years that have got contracts like that, never read it, and they've got a financial stock because the builder's gone or the plan didn't happen or there's issues with the product. So make sure you get a good lawyer. Get an accountant to do your tax that understands tax and depreciation, and you'll need a quantity surveyor's report. If you are going to buy an investment property, get professional property managers to do it for you. You've seen in the cash flow that it's not going to hurt you out of pocket. It is one of the most important things that you can do. So please, pretty please, with sugar on top, do not manage it yourself. It'll be the worst mistake you ever make, all right? Get them to do it. Now, again, there's a good download there, but you don't need to read the download guide. Got any property managers in the room? Yeah. There's a few here. Talk to them, get them to look after it. Go back to your team as First National and make sure they look after it for you. The real three problems are quite simple. It doesn't go up, you don't get tenants, or you get a bad one. Get landlord protection insurance to cover you from a bad one. Do what I was saying before about your rental projections. Make sure that you always cash flow is below the market and you'll always get a tenant. And capital growth over a long period of time, even bad one goes up. But if you focus on property cycles, infrastructure growth, buying for owner occupiers, capital growth will come and it will come faster and quicker. So, why don't people do it? They generally get talked out of it by other people or themselves. So, a litmus test for you, if you walk out of here tonight and you're thinking that you may want to do something, human nature, you're going to talk to someone at the pub, the cricket club, the guy over the fence and say, gee whiz, I'm thinking of buying property and making some money. If they say no to you, I want you to follow up with 2 questions. The first one being is, I need some more money. You're telling me no to property, give me an alternative. And if they can't give you an alternative, the next question is, can I have some of your money, please? If they don't give you any of their money, then stop talking to them. Just get on to people and get on with your life, because we all get talked out of other people. I'm not telling you to buy a property. All I'm saying to you is if you need more money and you've got some choices there, act on them, don't get talked out of by other people. So realistically, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to sort of try to get as much in as I possibly can, really it all comes back to one simple word, you or yours. It doesn't matter whether it's a home, first time buying, selling, or an investment property. The idea is to get a strategy built around you, right? Don't worry about your friends, your cousins, your aunties. What's yours? What can I spend? Is it the right thing? What's my emotions? What's my constraints? What's my future self? And build a plan of attack to get the best plan for you. Stop thinking of anybody else and just think of you. So, who do you choose? Who's the right answer? Oh, I bet everyone can guess that one. Hey, First National. Look, guys, the team at First National Rochedale have put this night on tonight, and they've got to be rewarded for that. But I want you to also understand that First National is a great part of a whole. There are a lot of offices out there at First National, and there's lots of different places. So you may want to buy here or there, but you may want to be a different area, and that's the thing with First National is we can help you everywhere, and we've got experts in doing that for you. So if you want our help, we're there to help you, and that's what we're really here for, and that's what tonight is, to help you go through the process. Do you want a valuation on your property? Do you want a better finance deal? Do you want some help buying an investment property? Do you want to sell the home? It doesn't matter what you're here for. At First National, we can help you through the journey. Now, how we do it from here tonight, we're not going to sit there and get you to buy anything tonight, but what we want to do is there's assistance there for you, right? So if you come out of here tonight and you want help in either buying, selling, finance, or investment property, we simply have a strategy session for you, okay? How it works is you have a one-on-one strategy session. Oh, these are comment forms, sorry, the girls are skipping ahead. So what we do at our strategy sessions is quite simple. We have a conversation with you, right? The strategy sessions are with First National Assist, because what we're trying to do in the first place is work out where you need to be. So what you do is you have a one-on-one session with us, and we work out whether you're buying, selling homes, need finance or investment, and then we're going to funnel you back to the right thing, okay? So those strategy sessions is to help you expand on tonight and point you in the right direction. The good thing is that it's all virtual these days, okay? Everyone's got a phone, a computer, a laptop, yeah? Right, pretty simple. All we do is we have a one-on-one session with you, we do it at your convenience, and it works from there. By the way, there's no cost to these sessions. There's no fees, there's no charges. Don't worry about it. If you're thinking about wanting to do one, and you go, gee whiz, I'm going to pay for it, you don't. First National, basically, we are a real estate business. It's no different. Where the costs become involved is if you need a property manager, you're going to have to pay a property manager to look after it for you. If you're looking at selling your property, well, that's where you're going to pay someone to sell it when they sell it. If you're looking at buying property, there aren't any fees and charges for that because the real estate agents get paid by the people that are selling the property. So the idea behind that is, yes, in time, there may be a fee in charge if you're selling or property management, but certainly in the short term, there isn't any. All right, so if you want some help, you walk out of here, just ask us and we're there for you. Look, we are very technical, but we're also very old school. Anyone who's attended tonight is going to get a text. So if you like the texting and booking your own appointments, just reply yes. If you're a bit old school, we'll circle a box on the comment forms. It's simple as that. However you want to do it, we can help you. So realistically, whatever you want to do, all I would say is do something about it. Just move through the process, get the help from the people around you. Now, where are we? Comment form. All we like in return is you thought the night was free, it ain't. No more free food, no more free booze. All I ask in return is some comment forms. Because First National, they want to get their feedback, they want to do something to help you out. What did you learn about the night? What did you get involved? So you can spend 35 seconds and write what you liked about the workshop. Would you bring some other people? Would you encourage it? Wonderful. What do you want to know more about? Now, if you want a strategy session, now I do these all over the country, but if you actually want a one-on-one with me, I say to everybody in every room, I put my hand on my heart, I'll give an hour of my time to anybody that wants it. All right? Simple as that. And I try to do that every year. So if you want a strategy session, say yes, give us a time and a date if you want to do it, and just put your phone number or your name. Now, if everybody puts their name at the bottom and some comments at the top, please wave them around at the end of it, because I've got some nice expensive moe I want to give back to someone in the audience just to fill some forms. So if you've got those, can you wave them up in the air when you fill them out? Because someone's going to walk away with some moe tonight. And whilst I'm doing that, and I'm actually on time, which is good, so we've got some questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, madam.
I noticed you're using interest only. Is that the best way to go?
Okay, so interest only versus principal and interest. Okay, so the question was, is interest only better than principal and interest? Fundamentally, if it's your home, you want to pay principal and interest because you want to get rid of the debt. If you're looking at an investment property, the reason I talk about interest only is because it's the least amount of cash flow that you can service, all right? In our home, we build our equity up by paying it off. With an investment property, we're building our equity by going up in value, not by paying it off, right? Now, is the answer, if you can pay more to pay it off, is that going to build you more equity? Yes, it is, 100%. But then what you've got to ask yourself is, am I paying principal and interest on one where I could actually service two or three? The other part of the equation is, do you still have a debt on your home? Now, if you've got a debt on your home and you're going to buy an investment property, I would encourage that you put your investment property on interest only, and the additional money that you have paid in principal, pay that off your home first, right? The goal is always to have your home freehold as much as you can, and you can let the investment property do its own thing. Does that make sense? Now, if you can do principal and interest on all of them, then wonderful. Cool. Any other questions, guys? No? All right. I've either done really well or really bad. There's extremely a lot of questions. Please don't give me the round of applause. Look, Tony, where are you? Can you give a hand to Tony and Francis? They put the hard work in. They did this event for you, so they deserve all the credit because it's their night. So, you know, just give them the round of applause. Tell them how much you love them. Now, if we got some comment forms, we can fill those in, and we'll have our beautiful barrel girl, Ian. Sorry, Ian and Liz have this great competition. Oh, this one down the back. Oh, who's the most pretty person in the room? Oh, Ian, one of the back. And we might get a photo. Sorry. Come on, you can be getting some photos. Okay. So, official barrel girl, can you pull a... I always prefer you, then I'll notice how he stepped up. Just pull one out.
Stop, move
Oh,
on.
hang on. Hang on, it's not on the back. All right, who was the lucky contestant? This is not like, you know, the live commission. It's pretty easy going.
Michael Sterling.
Don't knocking off the eggs. Everybody say cheese. Oh, sorry.
Well, look, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for the time. And we hope you enjoyed the evening. There will be another one in a few months' time. So, your friends and family, great. If you want an appointment, we'll see you online in the future. Other than that, all I want to leave you with one small thing. At First National, we put you first. Have a great night, guys.